So you wanna go to war with me? You're talking like you think you're royalty. You think that I'm afraid, but I don't break. I heard you question my stability. You think I'll fall just like a guillotine, but I am here to stay. Won't look away. The storm is coming, so you better start running. No, you can't control it in my bones. I'm coming for the, coming for the.
Hello. Welcome, everyone. I was busy not dancing this time, but copying Jessica's message about hopping over to the fundraiser stream for our friend, author JC Carpenter. So we got links around. Check it out. Yes. Jessica.
You know what?
Yes.
You know what I was doing?
What were you doing?
I got up to get my book so I would have it when we go to talk about it. And you know what I realized while I was up?
I just realized as you said it. Jessica, when I tell you I sat down today so proud of myself, I was like, I read the book. I vlogged it. I read the other book. I came with, y'all, I have so many questions for you today. I was like, I'm prepared. No, Jessica, no.
I think it was my turn again. It should be your turn. You're hosting. No, I think that means it's my turn. I don't know whose turn it is. Anyway, we didn't pick a new book because
we both failed.
We were not prepared.
We tried. Honestly, vague concerns at all times feels appropriate.
I'm telling you, that GIF that I keep talking about that I shared from The Haunting of Hill House, one foot in crazy and the other on a banana peel. And if that does not explain AuthorTube chat to a T, nothing ever will.
We need to work that into you know how the troublemakers have all of their like gifts on the ready, and to
just like
that's what we need. We'll get there eventually. All right, we're gonna say hello to some people before we jump in to the chat. Hello, everyone. We got Sam here. We got Jess here. We got Dreaming Truth author. Hello, Regina, Rainey, Paige, Jessica, Kelly, Rodney, Kat. Ooh, we're going. Ariadne, Jesse, hello. Jed is here. Welcome, everyone. It is incredible. Quote. Yes. We got Tony, Darlene. Welcome, everyone. For those of you who are confused by either the title or the thumbnail, today's AuthorTube chat is all about The Princess Bride.
Oh, this book.
What prompted Jess to remember for both of us, though we did not pick another one. We, this year, are going through Sid Field's screenplay, and as Jess very kindly explained to me, I was off by a chapter, so it was actually, not newly revised and updated. We were covering chapters 5 and 6 this month, and we both read The Princess Bride and watched The Princess Bride. That's what the chat's going to be about. If you did not do any of those things, I still have great questions for you. Like, have you ever had an idea that you recycled into another novel later? Such as, what do you believe makes a good ending? These are all relevant to the topic at hand. But first, Jessica, did you do the reading?
I did. I read this.
Yes.
I did not watch the movie, but I've seen it 153 times.
So you were
I had planned to watch it, but sometimes life just gets away from you.
Sometimes it does. That is very true. Y'all let me know if you guys watched or read or also read Sid Field. Let me know where you're at with The Princess Bride.
As I said in our private chat, obviously no one is reading the book along with us, or they would have known that we were talking about the wrong chapters during the last live stream.
Right.
I thought that we were talking about the wrong chapters, but I was told that I was incorrect, and I just went with it. And then I was like, no, that's not right. It was introduction, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. We're on 5, 6.
I was very confident and very wrong.
And we talked about chapter 5 last time, but we're going to talk about it a little bit today too, because I hadn't read it last week.
Yes.
And I have feelings.
Oh, good. So, I'm glad. Yes. Because
they're not good feelings. I wouldn't be too happy.
Okay. I briefly reviewed chapter 5 for this, so I'm glad you say that. I actually, Jess, did you like chapter 6 better than chapter 5?
I think chapter 6 made me less angry than chapter 5.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
That's about all I've got.
That's the teaser. Well, the order of my questions were The Princess Bride first. Are you cool with that?
Well, we can go whichever direction you want to go. We have said that we flip-flop and it just whatever happens. So
okay. Well,
whatever you're feeling.
We're flip-flopping. We're going to go with The Princess Bride first. And Regina with the quote, "My name is Inigo de Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." Which I think one of the things that was my favorite experience reading the book and watching the movie. I kind of like did both at different times. And the script. Oh, did anyone read the script besides me? The screenplay. Did you read the screenplay this time?
I didn't watch the movie, so I didn't.
Okay. The screenplay, y'all, was a really interesting experience, I thought. But for those of you who are not aware or maybe not aware, William Goldman is the author of the novel The Princess Bride, and he's also the writer of the screenplay. So this is one of the few adaptations, although Jess, Holes was the same way, wasn't it?
Yes, Holes was the same way.
We somehow picked 2 of the, I'm going to say very few, novel to screen adaptations where the author is also the one who wrote the screenplay. That does not happen often because of how rights are sold, and also because there's not a whole lot of novel screenwriter crossovers that's super common. So yeah, I just found it really fun to see how this quote very, very often in the book and very often in the movie.
I like the hello, and like how every time he says, like at the end, it like the hello changes. Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Oh, so good. Let's see if anyone else. Hello, we got more people popping in. We appreciate you being here for this one. I mean, yes, facts page. Rainy, I didn't read Sid Field this month, but I have read it and I enjoy hearing what you think of it. There we go.
So far, it appears that Becca's not here for me to hurt her feelings. So I'm living for that.
Oh, hey, if you guys are at a loss for the book this month. Oh, that's a good recommendation. I have never read Little Women, nor did I watch the movie. Thoughts, Jessica? I know older books are not your thing.
Older books are not my thing. It's also very long.
Is it? Is it quite long?
It's like this thick.
Oh, then I like that as a suggestion. We might have to do it another time.
She's like this big.
She's a chonky girl.
She's chonky.
Masterpiece. Both the novel and the book, which, okay, that is my personal feeling about both of these. But here's where question number 1. Is the Princess Bride book better than the movie? I think as a general statement, most readers will say that the book is better than the movie. But is this true for The Princess Bride? Do you think the book is better?
Do I think
Do you
the book
think?
is
Which
No.
do you think is better?
I prefer the movie.
You prefer the movie. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, hold on. We got a poll to do. Let me get this going. What about while I'm doing that, Jess, what about the movie versus the book do you prefer? Why the
So in the book, the entire scene at Mad Max's cabin, way funnier in the book in the movie than in the book, rather. It's very short in the book, and it kind of like is just kind of glossed over, but in the movie, it's great. Also the well, that is something they did in the book that they didn't do in the movie, but I don't know that they would. The Inigo and Fezzik going to the where they were holding Wesley captive and like having to go through like the different levels was interesting, but I don't know how that would have read on screen. But they also, instead of doing that, they put more into the forest, where it was like a much longer scene in the movie, and it had like they actually showed like the diving into the sand thing that wasn't in the book.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like they put the action more towards the front of the book, where they were trying to keep the pacing up, or towards the front of the movie rather, trying to keep the pacing up, versus that where it's like at the tail end. So it's one of those where it's like, I don't know. Also in the movie, when Princess Buttercup is presented to the kingdom, and the woman is like calling her all kinds of names and talking about how like she's forsaken true love.
Yeah.
That's not in the book. So I do prefer the movie to the book. That is to say that when you read the movie or read the book, if you've watched the movie, you just see the movie in your head because it's very, very similar.
It is extraordinarily similar. I appreciate that William Goldman knew what magic he had, and to at times just copy paste from the book to the movie. He's like, no, this dialogue slaps still. Keeping it the same. Like there were times where it was just, yes. I will say that like, I think I'm back to where I thought at the beginning, which is I love them both equally, which feels wrong because the movie is like a cult classic. But like I just love the way he writes. I find his like actual writing so good that even the parts where I'm like, this is not in theory as interesting or whatever, like the whole start of the whole start of this book where he's just like talking about himself being at the pool with like, it's not that interesting in comparison to the actual story, but I adore his writing that it doesn't bother me.
That would be my nephew in the shower, and I feel like he's struggling. I think he's dropping the soap on a rope or something in there.
We are dual transmitting. We are live in both places.
I will say there is also a difference between the book and the audiobook, because even the unabridged version of the audiobook doesn't have like the notes from the author in here.
Really?
Okay.
In it.
Yeah, because like this one has like me again. All of the cuts in this version, I feel most justified in making this one just as a chapter on whaling and Moby Dick can be omitted by all but the most punishment-loving readers. Like that, his inputs in this are not in the audiobook.
See, that's my thing. I really love his inputs. I think they do a good job of at times moving the story along and also like cutting the tension at the times where it needs to be cut and adding like a little bit more levity just to like, or to add tension.
I think that some of it is in there, but not all of it. And so it's like, because I mean, you see how massive this book is. Like it's a, I mean, it's not massive. It's not that big, but you know what I mean? Like it's a,
I mean,
all
mine was
Buttercup.
300 something.
Yeah, 340-ish pages. It's like a 3.5-hour audiobook.
Yeah. I couldn't get any copies of the audiobook from my library except for one that was only like 2 hours. And I was like, that cannot be correct.
It can't be right. It can't be right.
So I was like, well, I shall read it. Tony, that's so interesting. I disliked the movie because it felt disgraceful to the book. I think it's fascinating that he basically moved it to like a granddad-grandchild dynamic, being sick at home. And at one point he literally copies, which part is it? He interrupts to be like, his dad always interrupted at this part because he seemed anxious about it. You know, like he doesn't die here, like it's fine. And that's literally what they have in the movie too. And I just think that's so great. But again, it's the dynamics he chose is just fascinating to me when you think about taking something from the book to the screen.
And I think some of that had to do with just the character, like the actors that he wanted to have in the movie. I think had a good part. It was part of it.
I froze for a second because I remember that there's a part in actually this book where they reference William Goldman in the chapters we read, and I thought it was so funny. It was very briefly, but I was like, hey,
I know that guy.
That guy. Yeah. Oh gosh, I just so good. Before I was going to say before we move on, I have one other question that's kind of books movie-ish, but do you have any other thoughts about The Princess Bride as a whole, Jessica?
I mean, it's one of my favorite movies and favorite books of all time. It's a party in a book. And I don't know, part of me actually kind of wants to read S. Morgenstern's classic tale of true love and high adventure. Like I want the long version.
Give
me the extended version. Even if it's boring, I want the hidden footage version. Like I mean, we've got 12-hour extended editions of Lord of the Rings. Why can't I have S. Morgenstern's version?
Written like this, I'd read anything.
I mean, it wasn't all written. Okay, first off, it wasn't written at all, but it wasn't all written like that because that's why he cut it out. But you know what I'm saying.
Yes. No, I'm with you. Yeah. Look, if William Goldman told me the entire Florinese history, I would read it. That's what I want.
Right. Like I want the history of Florin and Gilda. I want all of the things. Like I want to know all of the things. I have so many questions.
Let's see. Regina, I love the movie. I found the book less intriguing. This is one of the very, very few movies I think are better than the book. Both objectively good, but they're good for different reasons. Oh, this was a question I had. So the way he starts the book, he basically makes himself a character, which I find a fascinating choice because some of the facts are true. Like when he's talking about his own accomplishments, more or less, like what he's written, he is indeed the writer of like All the President's Men and, different things that he references throughout the start. But like, he doesn't have a son. He actually in real life had 2 daughters. Like his wife was a completely different person. So he has a fictionalized question mark version of himself. Jessica, would you ever do that? And also, do you think someone could get away with doing that nowadays in the same vein?
Well, I think they could because I think, let's see, this was written in 1973.
Okay.
And in the,
yeah,
I say nowadays, but it was like in the early 2000s. In the early 2000s, when Stephen King did the miniseries Rose Red, they had someone write and release a book called The Diary of Ellen Rimbauer, who was the supposed woman, like who the original owner of Rose Red. And so they were like passing it off as Stephen King was writing a version of this story that was true in modern times based off of a diary that he had found that was written by Ellen Rimbauer.
Love that.
So technically they did this 30 years later. I don't know that we would call that necessarily modern because we're old, but it was done 30 years after this.
Yeah.
And they actually ended up, the Diary of Ellen Rimbauer sold so well that they ended up making a movie of it as well.
This is not the same thing, but it vaguely reminds me of The Princess Diaries was one of my favorite series growing up. And Meg Cabot had the character Mia Thermopolis also wanted to be a writer. And because of the popularity, Mia Thermopolis also wrote a book that was published, which I own somewhere back here, called Ransom My Heart, and it's actually pretty great. But of course, it's Meg Cabot writing as Mia Thermopolis writing this book. And so it is a kind of similar, like, nudge sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something that does still happen in modern times, but I think some of the best examples though are older.
They're not current.
But they're like classics now, like
yeah,
The Princess Bride, House of Leaves, like books that are written inside of other books, written by people who don't actually exist, at least not the full truth of the person. So
yeah, it is so quotable. Yes. Buttercup's Baby.
I have Buttercup's Baby in here. I don't know if I've ever read it.
I don't have it, and I am upset.
Includes the first chapter of the long-lost sequel, Buttercup's Baby, which I don't think ever actually existed. I think there is just the first chapter, if I remember correctly. But
which is just the funniest thing. It's like jokes on jokes on jokes. Let's see. Hated the ending of the book compared to the movie. Okay.
I thought they were very similar.
They are. He has his last little italics. So depending on if you listened, I don't know if they had included that in the... He has this last little bit where he's like, the S. Morgenstern version ends where they are like technically on the run and being chased still. And like, it's more hinted at that they're going to get caught. And then he... William Goldman is like, I prefer to think of the way my dad did it with the romantic take on it. But like, I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. But for the most part, by and large, it is the same as the movie.
I was trying to read the little end of the last chapter and then realized I was reading the end of Buttercup's Baby. Because I'm an idiot.
Oh, yes. Fond feelings for them both. I do love where a character breaks the fourth wall as narrator that just came out. Kind of spoiler. Ooh. That's the best first part about trying to share books, Miller Nature, where you're like, there's this really cool thing, but like I can't actually tell you about the cool thing because it's kind of twisty. A couple days ago, Marvel announced a book that was seen in the newest Ant-Man movie, like it is the actual book that which you can buy and read. That's very fun.
They also have a cover out for a biography of Scott Lang.
That's so cool.
I seen it and my brain did not compute that it was not a biography of Paul Rudd because like it has his picture on the front of it.
Right.
And I was just like, I was reading the description and I was like, wow, I never knew he had so much in common with his character. And then it was like, oh, Jessica.
You're like, wait a moment.
You're all right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That would trip me up at first too. It's so interesting how we think of it's the way that the faces are. Yeah.
It was his face. And I was just like, oh yeah, like who would think they would make a biography of Scott Lang? Like who would think that? No one.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, wait, what?
I recently read a newer book, kind of similar vein. There was a story inside a story, inside a story, and eventually the three stories intertwined. But one of the MCs read about himself in a book. Whoa, and was like, the fuck? That's interesting. That does vaguely remind me, Jess, one of the books we read last year, The Plot.
The Plot.
Yes.
Which I still am so mad about, but yet was so good.
Yeah, I was entertained the entire time. I think it's just impossible to have the plot of something live up to like this greatest thing of all time.
It's like, it was the plot was not that great. It was the idea of the plot of the actual book.
Yes.
It was not, I don't even know. I don't know.
But it was still good. Yeah. We'll have to do another tier ranking again at the very end of this year to compare and contrast. We'll have to have a little movies subsection too. Anyways, this begs the other question. What movies do you think are better than the books? As we have ended the poll and most people said the movie, which is by and large what I hear is most people for the movie version of The Princess Bride. There
are a few.
Yes.
Movies that I prefer to the book. And honestly, I think it's more of if I was going to re-immerse myself in the world of the Hunger Games, I would watch the movies rather than read the books.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because the books are kind of depressing. The movies are also kind of depressing, but I can get it over with quicker if I watch the movie than if I'm reading the books.
I was like, you know what? I see what you're saying. I think for any sad thing, I would probably agree. Because I can do it faster.
I can like remind myself of the story and the characters and like the way it made me feel without actually having to have all of the feels by rereading it.
Yes. I was doing my vlog for this, which I'll eventually edit, but I realized one of mine is, this is my copy of The Princess Bride on DVD, is Pride and Prejudice. This is my controversial opinion. What'd you say?
God, yes. That version in particular.
I knew you would agree. I think we talked about this, but this one, I was okay with the miniseries. I'm not mad at the miniseries. I do like it because I love all of Pride and Prejudice. But this movie, my God, so good. So that's my easy answer for that.
Chronicles of Narnia.
Oh.
I know they didn't make all of the movies, but again, if I want to revisit that world, I'm just going to watch the movies. First off, Ben Barnes. Second off, it's over quick.
Well, this is where I admit that I never read all or that many that I can remember. I think I have a copy of the Chronicles of Narnia, but I think it might be like a later book in the series. And also, I never saw the movies. I missed them. I know. I missed them. And now it's one of those where it's like, I don't know if it would live up the same way.
I read it in my 20s. Okay.
So I could still.
But Vampire Diaries. I haven't even read the books. I've just watched Gavin reading the books, and I can tell you that the movies that the TV show is way better than the books. That is it was like a 2-hour video. I don't even know how long it was. It was it's not the longest video ever because Gavin does all of those that are so long. But I will just sit and watch them, and I'm like, thank you for the entertainment, because I don't have the energy to read all of these myself, but watching someone else suffer through it makes me so happy.
I have not watched that particular video, but Gavin, excellent. Yes, Charlotte. Totally watched that over. Practical Magic. Love both the book and the movie, but the style the book is written in tends to influence my own writing, so I don't read it until I'm between projects. So that's very interesting. Yes. Shawshank Redemption movie was insanely better than the short story / book. I'm seeing Handmaid's Tale. Oh, I do the movies first and then the books. It won't ruin it for me that way. That's fair. True Blood.
I mean, we do need to somebody make a note put a pin in it, that Jessica and Kate need to talk to Becca about Vampire Academy.
Oh, yes.
Because we talked about doing a read of the first book, watching the movie, and watching the first and probably only series episode.
Yeah.
Why? It was so good. It was so good. It ended in like the most amazing place ever, and I can't.
This is what I say. I still haven't finished it, so that's perfect. Oh, look, it's Becca. Perfect timing. Hello, Becca.
Becca got here just in time for us to have this conversation, and then for me to badmouth her favorite book.
Like when we were summoning.
Because we need to figure out when we're going to do that one, because we're definitely going to do that one.
We are.
No one bullied Becca. That's rude. Gosh.
Let's see. Oh, wow. I took a class on C.S. Lewis in college. We read 3 of the Narnia books. I'd read them all as a child, and it was. I want to say I have The Magician's Nephew that I got from my grandma. But again, I have not read any of them fully.
They are, they're very Christian religion-y.
Yes, that's probably why I've avoided them as an adult.
But, I mean, it wasn't bad.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind that. It's just kind of, I say I don't mind that. I do mind that. But if it's done in a good way. I plan on binging the whole first season and rereading the book so we can discuss. Yay.
We just need to figure out which month we're going to do it in. Yeah. And I need to figure out what we're going to do next month.
We'll come up with something. Okay. Do we have any other thoughts? Oh, I put this as a note to myself, but I don't know if anyone else has Peacock, the app. But they're turning a lot of nonfiction books into documentary style TV shows. So like the Swedish Death Cleaning is one of those that started as a book and is now a TV show. And so is The Geography of Bliss, which I read ages ago, and they've now turned it into. So I just think it's interesting. There's this, we're really pulling even these nonfiction books to make like, and I'm sure with the strike, we'll see more and more reality TV style.
What else are they gonna do?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. Pay people.
Yeah. I would like to encourage everyone, though I don't think I have it currently in my description, so that's on me. But if you get a chance, we do have the link. I'll see if I can find it. We do have the link to the screenplay for The Princess Bride, and I would highly, highly, highly recommend people reading it while they watch the movie. If you want a good time, it is so fun to see the descriptions that William Goldman has. One of my favorite parts was actually the sword fight between Wesley and Inigo. He describes it as like, this is one of 2 of the greatest sword fights in the history of cinema. And the second one takes place later in this movie. Like it's just, he somehow infuses the humor of his book into the screenplay whilst not making it like, while not getting off topic. It's just very good. So yes. Links.
You'll have to copy paste that for your friends because
true.
Not in your chat.
You want to hear the annoying thing? StreamYard won't actually let me copy your thing from directly. So I have to go to your version. I have to go to your YouTube channel, displaying the video. I don't know. That's fine.
I can copy things in the chat. Rude.
I don't know. The studios haven't even gone to the table yet. It's going to be a long time. In the 3-month 2007 strike, they went to the table right away. So this is bad. Thank you, Becca, as ever, for our being our decipherer of what is going on. Oh, that's fascinating. I am intrigued. Okay, are there any other thoughts on The Princess Bride that anyone has? Jess has, chat has. Let me know before we vaguely move. Actually, I lied. I do have one last question that is vaguely related, okay? Which of your own works, Jess, of all of the stories you've ever conceptualized, would you most like to adapt for the screen? And I mean that you are the writer and you have sole control.
In
In my pretend universe.
in our pretend universe where I have actually finished said book.
Yes.
My adult high fantasy.
Okay.
Because I think it would be the most fun to do.
Yeah.
Also the most expensive. Also, just like the biggest, like, you know, as adult high fantasies are. You know, it's a big thing. It's like a big cinematic moment.
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. When I was thinking about this, had a similar kind of thought process where I was like, it's not my adult one, but I would love for my Meridian Maps pirate series to be. I think there's something about the grand scale of a fantasy that you're like, I want to see it.
Most expensive, the one that's going to be the biggest risk. That's
absolutely
the one. If I could just win like a $2.7 billion lottery and then write the book to then write the screenplay.
And then, I mean, if you had 2.7 billion, think of the time you would have.
I wouldn't have to go to my day job.
That's, see, my gothic gay romance to the point that I submitted it to Coverfly's cinematic book contest and got to the semifinals. Well, I have never heard of this. That sounds awesome. Congratulations getting to the semifinals. Coverfly cinematic book contest. I shall Google. That is incredible. I think semifinals is worth celebrating always. And then the other question, as we wait for other people's comments to maybe roll in, is, because I can't remember this fully, Jess, but do you see stories as images in your head when you're reading or writing? Okay. Do you find that influences your writing at all, where you're like kind of seeing the movie unfold in your head as you're going?
I think it hurts my writing because I see it. So why do I need to describe it?
Oh. Sometimes Jessica, me and you are just right there. Because I think sometimes too, I'm like, I see it so clearly. Why?
I don't know why you can't see.
I
see it. It's in here.
Yes.
You can't see that. I have said that instead of dictation, I want like this machine that I can just put on my brain and then just like think out the scene.
Yes.
And then it writes everything that I see.
My God. Yeah, I think it'd just be based solely on my imagination. Crushing it.
I could write so many books. Like, I had this thing that I stuck on my head and it like spit out what I can see.
That's it. If only. Let's see. Oh no, Charlotte, I'm so sorry. I'm in sick with laryngitis. Just snarking aside of what are they gonna do? Pay people.
It's true.
Always here for the snark. Good luck on your fanfic. Right now, what story I want a movie of is the screenplay I'm working on now. It's going to be a tearjerker, and it involves time travel. That does feel like the kind of perfect thing for the big screen, for a time travel movie. Oh, that's interesting, Rodney. Rodney has a similar kind of thing where it kind of locks him into third person because since I see it so clearly, I can never write first person well. That's interesting. Where you see it outside of the main character. So then when you're trying to get into the zone.
Yeah.
I've wished for that machine too.
I'm telling you.
I've always seen stories as movies or images, but what helps me being able to put it into paper is finding music. Oh, which gives me pacing and energy to the scene. I have hundreds of playlists. Jess has a great playlist for at least one of her projects.
Do I?
Yes! You sent me a playlist.
Oh, that kind of a playlist.
Yeah.
I do have a playlist for the Anku's Curse. I was like, what are you talking about?
I was like, I
Sorry.
liked it.
I was on another planet. My Anku's purse.
I would read that
Does
too.
he carry a purse now?
I'm Jess.
I need him to have a purse now.
Should they?
Anyhoozle, the Anku's Curse playlist has a bunch of bangers. So
Yeah, it's full of bangers.
It's my favorite thing to listen to, like when I'm doing anything. Now, if only it would help me write the story.
Okay, I see images and I need to in order to get into the mood vibe of each. Hi, Grace. Okay, Jess. I have a bunch of questions based off of chapters 5 and 6 of Sid Field's screenplay. If you guys happen to read it, or if you've just generally read the book, let us know. We will be discussing it in a way that I almost think maybe you don't need to read it. Jess,
what if the answer is just that they shouldn't read it, not that they don't have to?
I always look forward to what you think. I was like, you're giving me a Thermopolis vibes again.
Actually hurt my eyes.
So chapter 5 covered story and character, and chapter 6 covered endings and beginnings. Now, I'm a dum-dum and thought chapter 5 was for last stream, so I briefly reread only the parts that I had underlined because I underline as I go. So Jess, what in particular stuck out to you about chapter 5?
Chapter 5 to me read like it was written in the 1970s. Oh, wait, I think it was. First off, it kind of felt like they were just rewriting Legally Blonde. Like a rich white girl whose dad is a doctor and her mom quit her job so she could stay at home and be barefoot and pregnant. And then she goes into political science, which her parents don't like. And then when she graduates, she decides she wants to become a lawyer or I don't know, something, whatever it is she's doing. She goes into law and then she's trying to take down the man.
So Jess is talking about, in this chapter, Sid Field is like in the middle of a class and he was explaining how he builds character to the class. And they all do this exercise where they're just kind of throwing shit at the freaking wall. And that's how they came up with stuff. And it did feel vaguely Legally Blondie.
I mean, they talk about Jane Fonda. I mean, Jane Fonda, in case you weren't around back in the day, Jane Fonda used to have like these fantastic exercise tapes for women to exercise. And is there not an exercise lady in Legally Blonde?
I think there is. Exercising
gives you endorphins. Endorphins make you happy. Happy people don't just shoot their husbands. Okay? And also the ageism. Like, how old is she? She's 24. No, late 20s or early 30s. Why? Someone asks. I reply that when you're writing a screenplay, you're writing it for someone, for a star, someone who is bankable. Like, I'm sorry, you can't write. There's no one bankable at 20. Have you met Timothée Chalamet? Like, there's no one bankable at 24. Have you met Zendaya, my dude?
I was literally, as I was going over this, the big thing was, I think the difference coming from novel writing is we don't have to really think about any of that. Going into screenwriting, you have to think about who is bankable, who's going to star in it. So, Jess, I'm asking you, besides Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya, which actors do you think are currently bankable? Who would star in your movie?
Listen to his list of people. Paul Newman, I don't even know who that is. Steve McQueen, also don't know who that is. Clint Eastwood, I'm pretty sure he's dead. Jack Nicholson, sure. Dustin Hoffman, sure. Robert Redford, isn't he also dead? I mean, and then it says, in parentheses, today it will be Tom Cruise, Tom Hanks, Keanu Reeves, Matt Damon. Like, first off, most of these people don't even act anymore. Newly revised and updated, my dude. 2001, I think, or 4. I don't even remember anymore. It's in here, and I just don't care enough to look it up. My point is...
Oh, I didn't realize Sid Field died. Thank you, Miss Lucy Jane. Well, Jess, he could never update for the Timothy Chalamets.
Well, fine. Also, maybe that's in the next chapter. It might be in the next chapter. She gets a job. What kind of job does she get? Let's discuss. Well, she can't have a good job because she's a woman. Let's see.
I think it's still that chapter.
It is that chapter. Well, it was something else that I was thinking about, but I just seen that while I was flipping, trying to find the thing that I was looking for. It is definitely in the next chapter. Also, I have never heard of any of these things that he's comparing things to. Like, I don't even know. Like, American Beauty. Did I see it? I don't know. Maybe when it came out when I was 12. The Wild Bunch, never watched it. Bush Cassidy and Sundance Kid, never seen it. Bonnie and Clyde, never seen it. Thelma and Louise, never seen it. Cold Mountain, never seen it. $1 Million Baby, never seen it. I don't know any of these references.
Okay. So this is where we play our little balancing act. As Grace says that your rage is giving her life. I will say that there were a couple of things I appreciated in this chapter. I did not like chapter 5 as much as I like chapter 6, but I do think the concept of like having a room come together to try and organize things, create a character is really interesting. He at one point says, "This is a creative process, remember, and confusion and contradiction are a part of it," which I think is one of my favorite things. He does a couple of times where he's like, it's a creative process. Like, writing is hard. Sometimes you'll go forward to go back. Sometimes you have to circle around. Sometimes you got to write something down to realize that's not it. Like, he does, I find his, whatever this is, like encouraging in a way where he's definitely not about you need to get it right the first time. He's like, nah, you're going to just play around with it. Writing is play in a lot of ways.
I mean, I grasp the concept that like there's important stuff in here. Like, would I ever have thought like I need to make it a character that, you know, is bankable? But I mean, think about it this way. How much money does Disney make on the regular? Like 12-year-olds can be bankable. It depends on what you're writing and like, you know, what are you trying to write? Who's the audience you're trying to reach? And that's not part of what he's talking about here. Here he's talking about you need to have the story and like that's it.
Yeah, like, I think if you take a version of this in mind with like the Disney Channel or something, like if it was actually newly revised and updated, you could be like, okay, think of your markets. Be like, I imagine this on Disney Channel. I imagine this on the CW. Right. It's not the CW anymore. I don't remember what it's called. But like, you know, if you pick the things and you're like, this is exactly where I'm imagining it and that is what I'm writing for. In some ways it's like know your audience or know your market. And honestly, that was the best thing I got out of chapter 5 personally. I think for a lot of us at this point in our writing, we know how to craft a character. The character's not often the problem. I appreciate how he talks about these kind of internal versus external struggles. He calls them interior versus exterior.
Yeah.
Okay. And he divides exterior into professional, personal, and private. And basically, like, if you are genuinely really new to it, I think this is probably helpful. So this goes back into, I think this beginning part is just like, have you never made a character before? Read this chapter and it'll help, you know. Chapter 6, I got a little bit more out of, and that is endings and beginnings. Let me see if I had another question related to. No, because I forced you to do it last time thinking it was. One of the questions I had a poll for last chat was, do you guys create your characters first or do you create the scenario and then make characters to fit into it? And I think for the most part, most of us have done both, but more frequently make characters first, which I think is interesting.
Is it weird that my brain thinks of a character in a situation? Like, I don't think of a situation and then make a character to fit it, and I don't make a character and then find something to do with them. I think of a character in a situation, and then I build the rest of the world and I build the rest of the characters.
I literally get the inciting incident first, which requires both the character and like the kind of problem or new thing. Like
Yeah.
that's the first thing I see in a story is I'm like, ooh, this moment. And it requires both of those things. So I'm with you. What did I say? I think there's one time where I've had an idea for a concept and then fit characters in, but now I'm going through stuff and I don't know. Have I done that?
You know, I said that chapter 5 made me more angry than chapter 6, and I don't know if that's true anymore.
Well,
I'm looking at it.
Hold on. Me and Grace are gonna have fun with this one then. Rainey agrees with you. I feel like Jess puts into words the thoughts I had reading it. Having read it, I appreciate this book. But there wasn't a lot of storycraft stuff, which is helpful. It gave me insight into the world of gave you insight into the world of storytelling. I think it's or screenwriting. I mean, the point is this book is going to build on itself. Also, that's kind of why we're taking this incrementally as well. So, but you can see that we're this much of the way through, and I'd say so far, I don't know that I've found anything actionable to take out of this, but we are still very like, it's early days, as my Love Island people would say. So I am willing to wait until the end to see what happens.
I think that, I mean, the main point of chapter 6 is to show that you should know your ending when you start. And I feel like that's fair because you have to know where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can be, and that is something that he says, like, Kate, you use the term that I know you stole from somebody else. I don't know who from, but the headlights writer, where you can sometimes just write what you see in front of you. And then when you see the next thing, you can write that. Mm-hmm. And he kind of says, like, that's a viable option for someone who's writing a play or a book, but it's not really something you can do with a screenplay.
Which I think is really interesting. Yeah.
Which I think is an interesting opinion. I don't know if it's a true opinion or not, because I've never written a screenplay. So that's why I'm reading this book, for Sid Field to help me from the grave.
Sorry, I'm trying to put a poll up because that is literally one of the questions I had. And which is, do you, as you're envisioning your story, get the beginning of the story or the ending of the story first? Hold on, let me see. Do you usually know your ending or beginning first? Like when you've envisioned, I just said that I usually have the inciting incident first, but oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes I know the last scene of the story where I'm like, this is how I want it to end. Not always, but usually I do. So I would just be curious to know if there are some people who have a hard time starting a novel, like not knowing where to place it. And so for y'all, do you find it easier to come up with the ending or the beginning of your stories?
I think I'm similar to you. I'm like an inciting incident person, but again, it's because I see a person in a situation. Yeah. And so that makes make sense. And so figuring out where to start, like not starting too late, but also not starting too early, is really hard for me.
Okay, interesting.
But I do typically know, I won't say I know the ending as far as like what we're going to lead up to, like, you know, the final battle per se, but I know what the epilogue is going to be.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I know
resolution, which is his favorite word.
Right. I know what the inciting incident's going to be, and I know what the epilogue would be, but how we're going to defeat the evil at the end and how we're going to get there. Couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
No clue.
Yeah. That's
Not
the middle part. All a mystery. We'll find out together. But yeah,
Right.
where I'm going, I usually know. The destination and the route it takes to get there. Who's to say?
Me.
Mary, I voted beginning, but really it's usually some exciting scene in the middle somewhere. Oh, I should have put that as an option. Yes. Sometimes people get something in the middle. I kind of feel like they're tied intrinsically with me, where I at least have an idea of how the beginning and end tie together. Miller Nature, you would appreciate this chapter because he does say multiple times that the beginning, he uses a lot of different metaphors for this over the course of the chapter. But like one of them that stuck with me is that the beginning and the end of a story are the different sides of the same coin. It's often better if you can bring it all the way around again. If you've read Save the Cat, and if you're like really sold on that, there's a whole point about how the final image should tie back to the opening image, which I think they got. That Save the Cat was also originally like for the screen, so it kind of makes sense that that's the same kind of vibe. I come up with the story in my head, and for me, I figured out the beginning not too long before I started, plus I kind of figured people were always down for zombies. As the character comes to me first, one of the first things I think of is character arc. So I have a good idea of the beginning of the journey and the end. Beginning or middle first. But when I started brainstorming out, I tend to figure out the ending as it goes. Yes. Not out of 10, it's the end, usually where I want the character to end up. I know how to get from A to Z, but I don't always know what B through Y will be. Yes, or I may just know I, X, and Q. I love that. Yeah.
That's
yes. I think one of the interesting things he says in here is that he believes that before you start writing, in order, he thinks you need to know the ending, the beginning, and then like turning point 1 and 2. Does he call them turning points, or is it something else?
I think he just calls them Act 1 and Act 2. Is that what he said?
Hold on. I was like, I know I have this quote somewhere. Before you write one shot, one word of dialogue on paper, you must know 4 things: your ending, your beginning, plot point 1, and plot point 2 in that order. Those 4 elements, those 4 incidences, episodes, or events are the cornerstones, the foundation of your screenplay. So that's what he believes to be true.
I mean, do we know what he wrote?
I actually don't remember what he wrote. I would say, though, you know, sometimes people are better teachers than they are writers themselves, or like insert anything here. Celebrated producer, lecturer, teacher, and best-selling author. I can't remember what he wrote. He told us at some point that I've since forgotten.
But like, is this his best-selling book? Because whew.
I think it probably is.
Okay.
My very beginning comes almost last. I usually can start an inciting incident. My opening image and setup is fuzzy. Okay. I remember the first novel I ever wrote that I like finished the draft up. I still have it in my desk. I restarted the opening image and setup like a million different times because the inciting incident I was like, it's great, it's amazing, but like I could not for the life of me get there. So I feel you. For a novel, let's jump into Creative Vortex and see what comes out the other din. Revisions are for making it sound like you always knew the plan. Yes.
Unfortunately, I haven't figured out how to do that yet.
Okay, one of the other questions I had, these are quotes from the book. It's a good thought, but another story. That was, I think, chapter 5, actually. But have you ever had an idea that you really loved, but like could not make it work, and then you recycled it later into another novel?
That is part of the English language. So the Anku's Curse or Project Death. That's your book. What's my book? Dead Man. Oh my gosh. French Grim Reaper. That's his name.
Yeah.
Oh God, I'm going to take a nap. Anyway, French Grim Reaper then started off having, I'm stealing everybody's book titles, because it then turned into, like, I had ideas for other myths of Reapers, but it didn't fit in with the Anku. So then it became the new story for the other Graveyard book. Because the Graveyard book is the perfect title, but someone already has that, and he's way more famous than me. So that's kind of how I got into deciding to do multiple books about different Reaper myths. Because, like, I had plot points that would have been interesting but didn't fit for the old myths of the Anku, who is a real creature that existed in French folklore.
Which is a genius idea, and I love it.
I mean, it's still Eurocentric, but I'm pasty and white, and I don't know that it's my place to talk about other people's Reaper myths.
Yeah.
So, but it's not, it's different from what we grew up with in America.
Yes. Yes, it is. So. Shiloh is recycling an idea right now. It didn't fit the original characters, so I made new characters and some tweaks, and now it's a whole new thing. I infamously in my vlogs, have been trying to recycle this character of the prince a million times over. He's finally, like, solidified in Project Death, but, like, it is the same character that I tried to put in other things. Also, Regina recycling RS is killing me. Jess, I will be right back. I need to take my dog out real quick.
No, you're not allowed to take the dog out. Okay, let's see. Lucy Jane says he worked as a script reader for a lot of his career. If anybody knows his screenplays should work, it's the readers. Well, we'll talk about that when Kate gets back, because I have some very angry opinions about that. Not at you, but about something that he talks about in here about readers, you know? Oh, look, there's Kate.
I'm back. Let me chill outside.
We were discussing Lucy Jane's comment about if anybody knows how screenplays should work, it's the readers, which is the part of this that made me grumpy, this chapter.
Oh.
Because he talks about how everybody says they're going to read your script over the weekend. And what that means, nope. And that means they're going to give it to somebody to read within the next few weeks. A reader, secretary, receptionist, wife, girlfriend, assistant. If the reader says she likes it, the screenplay, then she'll pass it on to a creative executive who'll take the script home over the weekend and read it. So what that sentence tells me, what those two sentences tell me, is that this man believes that a woman's time is less important than his time, and that he's only going to pay attention to something that someone else has already said is good. And he's getting someone else to tell him what's good, a woman to tell him what's good. And then he's taking their smarts and their work and profiting off of it.
You know what I think?
That's what I read.
What edition do I have? This was updated in 2005. Our edition. He frequently throughout the book does this, by the way. It's always he for, like, a grander position. Always. He does not do the thing that we do now, which is, like, intermix them, do whatever, he, she, they, whatever. I have a copy of, like, what is it called? It's like writing nonfiction well, and he does it all the time. He's talked about his actual updated version where he's like, oh yeah, we were dumb back then and fucked up and should have, like, seen this and been better, but we weren't. And he's updated his to fix it.
I mean, he literally used words that describe women in the 80s. Receptionist, secretary, wife, girlfriend. He could have said spouse. He could have said partner. He could have used a whole butt ton of words, and instead he chose to say that women's time is not as important as his time, and he has greater power than they do. Becca, I understand the concept of that's how it works. Like someone who's higher up on the food chain makes someone else lower on the food chain read, and that those people typically are women, but that doesn't mean that I have to like it. I'm allowed to be angry about it.
I do think it was interesting that he also does talk about his work as a reader. He even says, when I was head of the story department of Cinemobile, I was always 70 scripts behind. He talks about how he was constantly reading and it went back on his desk, and like he just never was like through with reading things. So I just think it's interesting that he's readers read. That's what I circled on there.
He also said though, constantly reading, but he said that he only would read like the first 10 pages and he only read 3 a day.
Yeah, he did say first 10 pages, or yeah.
How long did it take this man? Did he have to have a second grader read it to him? I mean,
but here's also, I do think the advice,
3 hours long.
I do think the advice about the first 10 pages though is good advice. We talked about this last time, where it is like, yeah, if you don't have their attention, like.
I don't disagree with the advice and the knowledge in the book.
It's how he
I just disagree with the delivery system.
The delivery in that line is definitely poor. I agree with that. Let's see. Execs never read the script first ever.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't expect them to.
You're told to move on.
I know but my point is that he's saying like he spends his entire day at work reading, but he only reads 3 a day and he only reads 10 pages of each. I could read that. So you're telling me that this man gets paid a bajillion, well, he doesn't get paid anything because he's dead, but you're telling me that he got paid $1 bajillion to read 30 pages a day while the rest of us are out here breaking our backs, working 50 hours a week, getting paid in peanuts. That's what you're telling me. And I realize that that is accurate. I realize that he even said, I don't even know where he even said it, but somewhere in here, he said that Hollywood is a world of, I don't know, something in greed. What did he say? It was right here. It was right here somewhere.
Agreed.
Hollywood is something. I wish I could find it and I could tell you. But I grasp the concept. Like I grasp the concept that what he's saying is accurate, but that doesn't mean that I have to like it.
Well, I wish I could remember, because I do think it's interesting that he said 3 a day there, because I do remember being like, excuse me, because I think earlier in the book, he talks about having to go through, like, I want to say 30 is wrong. I'm just pulling a number out, but like literally like chapter 1 or 2 or something, he talks about how much he reads and it's a much higher number. So like, I don't know, did he update it and he only read 3? Like maybe that's the updated one. Or
maybe
like
at that point.
Because I remember early on he talked about how much he read, and it sounded like an actual lot. So I don't know. It was just a thing.
Well, and like
I find it.
My other thing is, I think I'm the only person on the planet apparently who hasn't seen Chinatown.
I haven't either.
But then he starts talking about the actual plot of Chinatown in this book. And I want to know why this man focuses so much on a movie about incest between a father and his daughter and their child. Like, that's the cinematic gold that you want to focus on. That's the thing. Like, there had to have been a better move. Like, sure, maybe Chinatown is like a cinematic, great book that has like all of the fun things and like has, I don't even know, like it's the best screenplay ever written, but it's a screenplay about a man who was having an incestuous relationship with his daughter and they created a child.
Dude, okay.
Why is that the book he's focused on? Like, or the movie he's focused on? You couldn't think of another one?
So I thought it was interesting because, okay, I've also never seen Chinatown. Was Picture is considered one of the best movies. I've heard about that. I know that. I do think though, with the he talks about Roman Polanski in it. I didn't realize that he came in and directed it, or like they talked about the rewrite process for Chinatown, right? And I was like, or am I getting my movies mixed up?
They use the forcible sex word,
and I was like, oh,
like 4 times in 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, I was like, from what this tracks.
This is not okay. Like, that's not okay. I'm sorry, it's not.
I think it's one of those that yeah, he's talking about of that time, and it is still considered one of the best screenplays in movies.
I grasp that concept, but
yeah, I had a giggle. I think when he was talking about that, I thought it was really interesting how I know that there's a lot. So once we as the writer have written the screenplay, I know it's a big deal about how much rewriting actually goes on. Like I was looking up William Goldman on Wikipedia for The Princess Bride, and it was talked about how he even grew frustrated at different times, even with like his own award-winning screenplays, because they'd come in and try and rewrite stuff, or like there was one that he didn't even want to claim because they'd come in and rewritten so much of it and he was so upset by it. But like that's so when they were talking about Chinatown, they talked about how they, if I'm remembering this is the right movie, they had to rewrite it 3 times because they were trying to come up with what the ending was.
It had like a good ending. That like the original person who wrote the screenplay that they picked up wrote an ending where it was like a happy ending, if you will, for the girl whose father was procreating with her. And instead of using that ending, they rewrote it to where she gets the shit end of the stick and the guy ends up being on top. The man who was doing things with his daughter that no man should do with their child or any child.
Yeah.
I don't know the context, but I feel like, okay, you know how they say like in politics that like when they say, well, I'm not saying that you're a racist, but I'm saying if racists agree with the things that you stand for, maybe you should check yourself.
Right.
That's how I feel about this. Like, I'm not saying that you're condoning those kinds of acts, and I'm not saying that seeing the movie would make me feel a different way about it, because it definitely could. But when you know that a large part of your audience may never have seen that thing yet, maybe pick a different thing to talk about, because it makes you look bad.
I think the other part is you and I are not the film buffs that I think he had written this book in mind for. He's like, he's writing this book of how to write a screenplay for the people who are obsessed. And actually, one of the things I loved at the end of the book, or at the end of the chapter, was when he says that you should be seeing and analyzing as many films as you can, at least 2 movies a week.
Yeah.
And he talks about how you should see all kinds of films. The good films, bad films, foreign films, old films, new films. Yes. And so I think if the idea is someone who's like, they are obsessed with movies, they will have seen Chinatown. And we're just not those people who have seen Chinatown. And so I think at the time, it is a good example. I think nowadays, if this is actually newly revised and updated, he'd have better examples.
I think if you read this originally, like if you had an old version, Chinatown may have been the only fucking screenplay he talked about in the whole book, because it is the one he talks about the most. It is the one he mentions the most. It is the one that he actually breaks down plot points for. In the next chapter, we get the actual parts of the screenplay of Chinatown. Like, I just, like, again, I haven't seen it. I don't know the thing. But I feel like if you're looking for foundation, if you're looking for the foundation of screenwriting, that means you're a beginner. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if you're a beginner, there should be some leeway at not knowing all of the things, especially when you're looking at it 50 years on from the published date. 50 years from the published date. And maybe it's only 40. Maybe 73 was The Princess Bride. Either way. Yeah, 84. So 40 years.
Yeah, yeah. I see what you're saying. I think if you compare it to something like, let's say Save the Cat writes a novel, I actually think that Jessica Brody does an incredible job of explaining in depth the books, even if you haven't read them. I found the explanation for the movie as he wrote it actually a little bit confusing to follow. And so that took me out a little bit when we're going in depth, but also I kind of do need to see it though. For usually those who have all seen Chinatown. Yeah, I think it's like, I think if you were actually doing this as like you were invested, like I bet this is the kind of book that's recommended in like a curriculum for if you're studying film or something. They're going to be like, here's the movies that accompany it that you should watch before we discuss. Like you need to see the greats.
Yeah.
Like, you have all the.
Because I'm not saying that this book isn't well done or that it's not helpful for people or that it's not like people who like it are bad people or don't have taste. I'm just saying for me, this is awful.
Yes. Yeah. Fair.
Like it's a terrible vessel for the knowledge for me personally. I have no frame of reference.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be like giving someone a unicorn and telling them to feed it, and they're like, with what? My arm, carrots? Do they eat cotton candy? I don't know. I have no frame of reference. I've never had a unicorn before.
We need a newly revised and updated version with like we'll find some just
when I tell you that I think of the over 100 screenplays he's talked about in this book so far in chapter 6, I've seen 4 of them. Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Titanic, and Mean Girls.
Yeah, I would say
really, I'm a film buff.
And you know what? I probably have seen maybe double what you have, and that is still nothing in comparison to the amount he references. And also, I haven't seen the big ones that he's referencing repeatedly either. Like, I'm trying to think of which one is American Beauty is the one he's referenced a lot. He went into depth on earlier.
Which again, I probably seen when it came out in the late 80s, early 90s, but I was like 12 or 13. No, in the late 80s, early 90s, I was 5. You know what I'm saying, though. Like, it came out in the 90s, and I was a preteen.
Let me, other than endings and beginnings, two sides of the same coin. Oh, I do have another question. Are you ready for this? Well, actually, I have 2 questions, apparently. Do you agree with or disagree with the statement, if you have a problem with your ending, the answer always lies in the beginning? Have you ever found that to be true? Have you ever struggled with an ending, writing an ending?
I don't know if I've ever struggled with an ending. It's the beginning that I struggle with.
Okay.
I really struggle with beginnings. The start is always the hardest for me.
Yeah.
Where do you start? Like, how far is too far? How close is too close?
How close is too close to the inciting incident? And
how loose is your goose? How funky is your chicken?
I'm trying to think. I'm wondering again if this is more like opening image versus final image thing. Because by the time I get to writing the ending of a story, I've never had an issue coming up with the end. Certainly by that point, I'm like, I know what I want the ending to be. I could see though, I wonder if maybe the length of a film would make the ending harder. Like it's a shorter project, so maybe you don't have as much time to mull over it. I don't know. For our screenwriters out there, do you notice a difference between the ending in a screenplay versus a novel? Rainey says, I always struggle with the ending. Just had a thought now that maybe the reason why I'm struggling with the ending is because the beginning doesn't really work. I mean, that is what Sid Field would tell you. That is his conundrum. Okay, Sarah, I struggle so much with endings. When you'll say you struggle, do you have like a specific struggle that's recurring, or is it like just not knowing where to end it? Is it that it's not feeling completely right? I think the only time I've struggled with an ending is when I'm like, is this powerful enough? In which case maybe the beginning and having that full circle moment is really all that you need to have like the, progress has been made. He says at one point it's important to tie together all the loose ends of the narrative line so the screenplay becomes a complete reading and visual experience in the mind's eye that rings true and is integral to the action and the characters. He says you need two things to make a good ending, which is my next question. The final question. He says that you need it to be believable and you need a feeling of satisfaction to make a good ending. So that would be my question for y'all is, do you think there's anything else to make an ending good? I hate most tropes, so I want things to feel closed without being cheesy and disappointing. Oh, so it's not just that you want it to be earned. You just don't want it to be like the stereotypical ending, maybe. I'm thinking of the hero's journey where the journey goes full circle. Yes. I think this is especially true of screenplays simply because it has to be compacted within 2 hours. Okay, that's what I was thinking. You have so much time to wind down at a book. Thank you, Becca. Okay. I feel good that my thought process was there, having not written a full screenplay before. But that totally makes sense when you're thinking about just the span of a few pages to really like wind it all down. I could see how that would be harder. I feel like I have the same issues with endings with screenplays as with novels, but it is easier to get those issues because it isn't as big of a chunk to write, like 6,000 words. Sarah, I've had this before too. I'll actually stop watching a TV show before the ending because I'm afraid it'll be disappointing. I have it where I just don't want it to end.
You mean Kate, who hasn't watched the last episode of Vampire Academy yet?
Yes. I just don't want it to end. So it's in theory in my brain never ending if I just don't watch the last episode. It makes
not how it works.
Don't question it.
Not how it works, Catherine.
I can live with some loose ends, but I need the ending to actually make sense. And I need it to feel as if there's and I need it to feel if there's no closure for the character, there is still room for closure or character growth. Again, the references I had not actually watched that he talks about, but he does mention the kind of after the movies ended, there are several ended. After it's like faded out, there have been some scenes after the credits or something where it kind of, if it doesn't close everything, it like closes and opens things. Like I guess there's some wiggle room within there. Oh, one of the other things I thought was interesting, which I had never thought about, but like makes sense as he said it, is that screenwriters obviously aren't the ones placing the credits. He's like, you don't need to put roll credits here or anything in your screenplay. He's like, that's the job of the director and the editor in editing.
Right.
Like
that is not your job.
That is not your job. Stay in your lane. And I just thought that was like, oh yeah, of course, that makes sense. I don't know that I thought that you'd do that, but I could see how someone starting would be confused, like, oh, should I elongate this and put this here so that they have time for, if you're a true beginner, it makes sense.
That's why I think, like, where we're talking about like TV shows and like the endings, I think that's why miniseries are so good, because it has a planned ending.
Yes.
Or even like if you look at the tale of Supernatural, ye who lived on for eons, almost 2 full decades of Supernatural. But the original story ended at the end of season 5. And if you watch those first 5 seasons, they are a great, complete story. Are there great episodes after that? Yes. Are there good seasons after that? Yes. But it gets a little crazy. So you need to know your ending. And he knew his ending, and it was the end of season 5.
And you need to stick with the ending.
And then someone else took the reins because it was making the dollar bills. And then it became crazy. And then the ending of the actual ending in this timeline that we're in is not the best.
Yep. Rainey agrees with you.
Yeah.
Charlotte, endings are hard, although the thing that helped me figure out mine was the mice quotient from Mary Robinette Cowell, who explains its opening and closing brackets of code. Grace continues, also loves the mice quotient. It has been a while since I watched the video of her explaining it. I need to watch that again. So I was able to work mine out by looking at which arcs were the first to be open and then making them the last things to close off. Love that. I remember one of the things that stuck with me was always I had beta read for someone, and this is why I love beta reading. You learn so much about writing through beta reading. Was the person had basically done the thing where it seemed like they closed all of their little bits off, and I was like, well, I have no more questions. You've answered everything, and there was still like 100 pages left of the manuscript, and I was like, I need another question to keep me going, because otherwise why would I keep reading? He had a whole twist that was really cool, but like I didn't feel like it was going.
I will say though that like we're talking about like it needs to have an ending and I need more questions. However, the last book, the third book in the Infernal Devices series by Cassie Clare, that third book, the epilogue is like 80 pages. And I sobbed the entire, like racking sobs of grief the entire time. There was no question about what was happening. You knew exactly what was going to happen because you had read like the series before that happened after it. So like you knew what was going to happen. You knew where things were going, but also it was the epilogue. Like the big bad was already over. We're looking at years in the future and we're watching how things are taking place years in the future. And for 80 pages, I sat and literally sobbed, snot running down my face. There were no questions left. And I had a terrible time, but it was a great time. You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. You know my personal opinion on it.
Right. I
But,
do.
like, I understand what you're saying in your heart. I think that's an interesting like part of it where the way she'd done the timeline in her stories where she made the prequels after sort of
it's really just like if I love the characters, if there's no questions left and you're just showing me like a day in their life, I'm happy.
Well, this is where I think it goes back to like where I said I would read anything, frankly, with the way that William Goldman writes. So it doesn't bother me, the part that bothers some people, because I'm happy to read it. I think if you find someone that it just like meshes with you, where you love the characters so much or you love the writing, you're like, I'll read whatever. Doesn't matter.
I'll read.
It's
you can compare it to when someone has a singing voice that is so great that you say, I would listen to them sing the phone book.
Yes. And you know what? This is now officially my dumbest goal, is that one day I will make someone feel that once. I want only one person to be like, she just does it so good. She writes so well. I don't need a lot of them, but just one who's like, I'll read whatever.
I will read whatever. I've decided within this conversation,
okay,
that this coming month,
yes,
rather than reading a book and watching a movie,
okay,
for our homework,
okay,
we, meaning you and I and whoever else would like to join us, are going to watch Chinatown.
Yes,
and we're gonna read the screenplay. It's available. I checked, so we can read the screenplay while we watch it, and then maybe we'll be less angry while we read the book because we'll actually have some context. That's our homework this month.
I love it.
Our homework is chapters 7 and 8.
And Chinatown.
And Chinatown.
And the screenplay. Everyone this time.
And the screenplay. Since we're not reading a book, you have to read the screenplay with the movie.
Yes.
It came out in the 70s. I'm sure it exists on some streaming platform somewhere.
Yeah. Maybe we should Google that real quick. Where to watch Chinatown? Paramount Plus. Roku, Showtime, Prime Video.
Spectrum TV, Sling TV.
It looks like there's places.
There's lots of places you can watch it. It's 100 Hulu.
HBO Max, if Max doesn't get rid of it by the time.
Right.
Yes.
You can probably rent it for $2 from Amazon.
Yes. Becca is she's asking the important questions, Jessica.
I don't automatically hate anything. Even if I hate it, I'll still have context.
Which is really all we need, is like, as this goes on.
Like, I just feel like he's talking about something that I have no context for. And yes, that's on me. And like I said, it's not a bad book, and I'm not mad about that aspect of it. I just don't like it.
Let's see. I do appreciate Sarah saying, I disagree with the idea that you have to close arcs in the reverse order you start them. There are some exceptions, but I do think that I think that's true with any equation.
There's always exceptions to the rule.
There's always exceptions. It's not something that I'm super strict with. Endings should have a catharsis. Isn't it a positive and negative sense of being tent? Ahaha. Stories, I find it doesn't actually end there. I find it in series. It's like, ooh. Emotionally, yes. Okay. There we go. Thank you, Rainey. Just as you knew, and we'll talk more about Chinatown later.
I said, the next chapter actually has part of the screenplay in it. So I'm thinking, as much as he's talked about it, we should just watch it so we'll have some context. Also, we didn't have a book picked, so it works.
It's perfect. I do think, though, that does officially start our... See if you can design your opening 10 pages in such a way. Oh, actually, the homework on that one is watch Chinatown. So, Jess, we're doing it. It literally is.
Watch Chinatown. See how the backdrop of the action, the scandal is introduced.
See if you can design your own opening 10 pages in such a way that you introduce the main character, state the dramatic premise, and sketch the dramatic situation in the most cinematic way.
Does anybody else feel like that kid who read the entire summer reading list like before summer hit? Because that's how I feel right now.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's our only homework. I don't
think no one had watched it yet.
What'd you say?
Was he assuming that no one had watched it yet?
I think he's just making sure, you know? He's like, just in case. Just rewatch it, you know? It's one of those where you're like, this is so good that you need to rewatch it in order to...
He didn't say to rewatch it. He said to watch it.
Should have used some parentheses there. I will say that on the next chapter, when he's talking about things to watch, I have seen The Usual Suspects. So I am 1 for 5 of the ones he recommends, I think. And the next chapter after that. All right. Jessica, we have done it.
We have been here for an hour and a half. Normally we give up at an hour. We're doing crazy things today.
We had so much to discuss. Yes. Thank you guys for joining us. Yeah, he was speaking directly to you from the past. He was like, Jessica,
listen.
He assumed, and he was correct.
He's correct.
So we will do it. Everyone, watch Chinatown. And that will be June. Oh, it'll be after the weekend relay.
Will it?
Yes.
1, 2, 3. It'll be the 20th, yeah.
20th. So just after the weekend relay, just after the 24-hour write-a-thon, 24-hour novel, we'll be ready for some movie time. Okay, everyone, we will see you next time. Hopefully with 10 pages of your screenplay. Okay, bye.
Bye.